Hi everybody, it's a regular girl with mucus in my throat, which in my last video I figured out that probably from the bread I eat every day. But I'm down here having my iced caramel macchiato. That's my favorite drink at the Mission Brew Coffee here at the Croc Center. But I also discovered yesterday there's an electrical outlet over on the side that works. So I'm going to be down here even more often, which has turned out to be frequently now because I really love being by the water. I need to be by the water, at the very least. And now that I can bring my plug for my chair so it doesn't run out, and I can bring a plug for my phone so it doesn't run out. And this Mission Brew coffee place is starting to be open more often. They open at 7 o'clock in the morning. They used to close at noon, but the business is so good, the guy told me, they're staying open more often. So yahoo, yee-hoo, yippee-yi-yay. A couple of bus stops right here. I can charge up my chair, charge up my phone, make some videos, and do the crosswalk. There's this fabulous art exhibit by Chris Erickson, is the artist's name. And his drawings, his artwork, they're not just drawings, I think they're prints, are hooked up with a biblical reference for the crosswalk. It started at Easter time, and I love this thing. I love these prints because they're very different from any Stations of the Cross that I have ever seen, and I grew up Catholic, so I've seen quite a few Stations of the Cross in my time. Parochial school, elementary school, and high school, but these are different. Then I read his bio, and I really identified with him in some ways because of his experience as an artist and as a Christian, as a spiritual person, because that was sort of my dilemma too when I was young, in my early 20s, and realized I was an artist, but hey, I was also, I had this strong spiritual path as well. Who was going to buy my art? Probably very, very few. Certainly not the mainstream artist community. So how was I going to make a living? Flipping burgers? Well, okay, yeah, but other people who are artists were not going to be looking to be flipping burgers. They were going to be looking to be, maybe millionaires by selling their art if something good happened along the way. Whereas, if I was going to be painting pictures of Jesus or other spiritual scenarios, maybe the sales would not be as well. Now, things have changed. Now if you look on Netflix, there's Stiesel. It's a really great drama. I loved it anyway, but it's about that very same predicament that the main character finds himself in. But, things work out for him. But back in 1975, it wasn't like that. So what did I do? Flip burgers. I did at Mr. Burger as a vegetarian woman. I would wear that goofy hat, flip greasy burgers for people, and I was a vegetarian. And a very young wannabe artist who had a little bit of school from the Art Students League of New York. I was living in Honolulu. I had no idea I was going to talk about this, but it's the truth about me. And there I was, and oh, look at that weird thing on my eye. Anyway, both eyes. So there I was in Honolulu, and there were no longer trees to draw because the trees in Honolulu were very, very different. So I kind of lost my things to draw, so I started singing again. Of course, not to anybody who could hear me, always by myself in my room, along with the recordings. But I did teach myself to play the guitar at that point because there was an old guitar that was left in a room by somebody next door, and the landlord gave it to me. I guess he had heard me singing. Yeah, he did. Of course he did. Oki was his name, Mr. Okinawa, Mr. Okamura. Mr. Okamura was his real name. We called him Oki. And he was the owner of the houses that he rented rooms to mostly college students. I was not in college. Now, should I tell this part of the story at this point? Maybe I will, because maybe I'll forget. because I did want to go to college. Here's why I could not go to the University of Hawaii. My father, my real father, my birth father, who was living on the island of Oahu, would not say that I lived with him, so I did not have an address in Honolulu. And the man that I was living with as his lover on that property, he would not allow me to use that as a mailing address either. So I couldn't go down to the University of Hawaii and give a Hawaii address as my residence. Therefore, I could not go to the University of Hawaii as a Hawaii resident. Those goofballs, those two goofball men in my life, they probably show up in my astrological chart somehow, in that stupid Saturnian placement. Two assholes, two fools. We're going back to 1977, 1976, 1977. Those two goofballs. So it took me up until maybe 5 years ago here in San Diego till I would say, my father's no longer alive, but I would have said the same kind of things to him if he was alive now, meaning I would have put it in cash value. I would have transferred it into fungible terms. And I did that with the other goofball who I was living with and was his lover, his very young lover with gorgeous fucking legs and big tits. That's what I had. Those things are of value to men, and I know that now as an older woman. And I would have said to him, hey, guess what, asshole? Because he was cheap, real cheap. Except when he'd go on his little manic things and go to the store and spend extra money, or he'd pay go and go on a binge, and then he'd buy me some extra gifts or whatever. But he wouldn't put me, I was not allowed to say that I lived there so that I could go to fucking college, which is where I belonged, not flipping burgers. So it turned out that it looked like I was having a hard time taking care of myself. I was in the wrong mother effing place. I was a scholar. I was not a burger flipper. I was not a salesperson. So my father would come over. He was a salesman. He would come over and try and convince me I should maybe sell things like he did. Larry was like that too. I could sell things. Go F yourself. He's still alive so he can hear me. Go F yourself, Larry. Sell things. Still in San Diego, after I had a master's degree in music, I showed up here. He's telling me I should go sell things. Go F yourself, Larry. I have a master's degree in music. Go F yourself. His friend told him the same thing. Are you crazy? She has a master's degree in music. The fuck is she gonna sell things for? This asshole. He wouldn't help me because I wasn't selling things. I wasn't trying. I wasn't really walking around with a fucking broken hip. Seriously. It was as good as a broken hip what I had. Necrosis of the hip is what it's called. They had to wait till I had an MRI, till they had the official term. Necrosis of the left hip. Here I am in the fucking motor chair. You know how many years it took me to get this official thing sitting in the motor chair so that these assholes could see? They had me walking around on this hip to prove to them that I was really trying, cleaning their fucking dirty toilets, their fucking dirty houses. Larry, you fucking cheap ass piece of shit. Well, there goes the Jesus teaching. Looks like I need more to learn there, huh? Anyway, wouldn't let me use the address that's where I lived so that I could go to start school at the University of Hawaii. Finally, after I was working at the Y in the after-school program, taking care of the kids, I was able to take the continuing ed version. The continuing ed version of the psychology class where I got the A+ in the psychology class. That was the beginning of my college years at the University of Hawaii, Manoa. Still there on record, I'm sure. But still could not be a matriculated student because I didn't have the address yet. Unbelievable. Enough years living at the same address as residents. But by the time I did, the only music program they had there was the classical music program, and I did have enough sense to know that that was not my thing. It wasn't. even though that by then I was studying with a vocal teacher who was teaching me classical repertoire, I knew I was not going to be an opera singer. Now, this came up later, too, when I went back to New York. Marnie Nixon put me on a merit scholarship. She said, you have got what is a real contralto voice here, I think. And you know what? There's not a lot of people going for the contralto parts. So if you want to, I will train you. I will train you to be a contralto. So even though I've started a series on Marnie Nixon on one of my channels, I didn't tell this personal part of it because here we got some goofball shenanigans from one of my parents here too, only it's my mother. So here's what she said. She said, however, at some point, you need to tell your mother this. You're going to need to put up some money because you're going to need some language coaching, and I can't pay for that. So you're going to need some money to take some language coaching at some point. I'm going to teach you this, the technique. I'll get you ready for this, but there's a sound coming out of your voice, coming out of you that's like none other that I've heard, and I've heard a lot, and I really think that you can make it, you know. There are not a lot of people going for the contralto parts, and you got a special sound. So I'll train you with this, but you got to be serious. It's commitment, and then, you know, we're going to have to do some language coaching and get your repertoire, and then I'll set you up with some auditions. This is New York City. She lived on the Upper West Side, right near Lincoln Center. This was big time, big deal. Guess what happened? Guess what happened? Guess who was the fool? And guess how? Guess what her suggestion, my mother. She had a job for me. She had a job for me working in her little Planned Parenthood office to make some money. Even though, see, and this is what I didn't understand because it wasn't my area. What I didn't understand was that their house in the South Bronx was already paid for. It was already paid for. So them asking me for rent was effing moot. Her asking me for rent to train me to be responsible, effing moot. All right? And she was collecting rent from her mother, from my grandmother, who was living on this, like, stipend. What she got from having worked at Columbia Presbyterian was this tiny, tiny amount. She and her sister lived there. They made them pay rent as well. I didn't realize that at the time, what they were doing. That's what they did. And now, that house was sold, and every month, my sister and my brother's children get money from that fucking house on Alexander Avenue, the very same house where I would freeze in the wintertime, having to breathe in a kerosene heater, the fumes from a kerosene heater. I had to breathe those in because he was too cheap to put the real heat on, and too cheap to give my grandmother an air conditioner, where she died in the summertime from heat exhaustion. Nobody talks about this, the real deal. What? They were not that old. They were in their 70s when they died from heat stroke, heat exhaustion, in August, in July, in the South Bronx, listening to those disgusting boom boxes and all that nonsense. So this is the real story of that part of it. That's just a little bit of it. That's who those people were. That's who she was, my mother. That's the kind of way she thought. That's the kind of actions that she took about life. So 14 minutes. Well, good. I've told a little bit of the story now. This is going up on the YouTube. If I've forgotten anything, I will add to it. Hasta la vista, mamma mia. Boom, bang, bing.